International Trade Focus is brought to you by GOIL and Agricultural Development Bank.
Coming up on International Trade Focus, we shall take a look at the global surge in oil prices. As global oil prices continue to rise astronomically, is there a way out of this high energy cost for a developing country like Ghana? For some months now, consumers all over the world are experiencing constant and unending increases in the prices of commodities, and prices of petroleum products have been identified as the main cause. On today's edition of International Trade Focus, we want to interrogate this phenomenon further and find out how the situation could look like in the immediate future. My name is Anna Spio and this is International Trade Focus. International Trade Focus is brought to you by GOIL, Good Energy, ADB, Truly, Agric and More, Public Elegance and Pediasi Valley Resort. Stay tuned for our focal point segment. Petroleum products are fuels made from crude oil and hydrocarbons contained in natural gas. As the main source of energy in the global economy, petroleum products are used to power the industrial sector. Oil is the major source of industrial power. Diesel and gasoline are used in gas turbines to produce electricity. The world's transport system relies heavily on petroleum. Petroleum has transmuted the entire transport system, be it road, rail, water, or air transport. Petrol and diesel are the main sources of energy for all types of modern transport vehicles. Petrochemicals are used to manufacture thousands of different products, including plastics, medicines, cosmetics, furniture, appliances, electronics, solar power panels, and wind turbines. The importance of petroleum products to the global economy can therefore not be overemphasized. In recent times, the cost of petroleum products has skyrocketed. At the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic in the year 2020, the price of oil plunged to its lowest as a result of lockdowns that drastically reduced global production and trade volumes. Countries that are net exporters of oil experienced an unprecedented double blow driven by the COVID-19 pandemic and what was described then as an oil market collapse, with the benchmark price for United States crude oil, the West Texas Intermediate, briefly going negative for the first time in history in April 2020. Based on an oil price of $30 per barrel, the International Energy Agency projected that oil and gas revenues for a number of key producers will fall between 50 and 85% in 2020 compared with 2019. However, oil prices began to climb up when lockdowns were eased, allowing production and economic activities to bounce back. However, since February 2022, geopolitical tensions attributed to the Russia-Ukraine conflict has been the main driving force behind the recent hike in oil prices globally. Since oil is a feedstock, the enabler of transportation and energy for industries and all other forms of production, a continuous rising cost of oil and petroleum products have a direct impact on global inflation levels. In the case of Ghana, records indicate that although there is some amount of local production and export, the quantum of petroleum products that the country imports far outweigh local production. For this reason, one can say Ghana is a net importer of petroleum products. The Observatory of Economic Complexity, OEC, reports that in 2020, Ghana exported $2.71 billion in crude petroleum, making it the 27th largest exporter of crude petroleum in the world. In the same year, Ghana imported $133 million in crude petroleum, becoming the 73rd largest importer of crude petroleum in the world. Presently in Ghana, the impact of high petroleum prices has resulted in high transportation costs and rising inflation. Although this phenomenon is not peculiar to Ghana, there's continuous agitation by some independent bodies and the general public to compel government to reduce petroleum prices. But whether or not this can be done is another issue. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies agreed to pump an additional 648,000 barrels of crude a day into the global market in July and August, 200,000 more than planned. The International Energy Agency, IEA, predicts that global oil production, excluding Russia, should rise more than 3 million barrels a day for the rest of the year, balancing out the impact of sanctions. However, some energy analysts say even before the Russia-Ukraine war, oil producers were winding down investment in production as they pivoted towards renewable energy, and that OPEC has its limit. On our Index segment this week, we'll be taking a look at the surge in the prices of petroleum products and whether there's a way out for a country like Ghana. Joining us in this discussion is the Executive Director of KITE, Mr. Ishmael Ajekumhene. Don't go away. So the global surge in oil prices occasioned by the Russian-Ukraine conflict has taken a hard bite at both advanced and developing economies. There's no doubt that this phenomenon has brought about the increase in prices of commodities on the global market. But is there a way out of this high energy cost for a country like Ghana? That's what we want to take a look at in today's edition of International Trade Figures. Our guest for today is Mr. Ishmael Ajekumhene. I'll let him introduce his outfit to us. He's an energy expert and the Executive Director of KITE. So before we delve deeper into today's topic, tell us a little bit about KITE.
So thank you and welcome to my place. So KITE is a policy, research and advocacy organization. We want to refrain from using the word think tanks, but we practically do stuff like that. We've been around since 1996. We work mainly in the area of energy and environment. And like I said earlier on, we do research and also do advocacy and sometimes do direct project implementation. We started off in Kumasi and opened the Accra office in 2002. And we've since moved the headquarters to Accra, and there are about 15 of us working in KITE.
All right, so the topic of the day. We've heard over and over again the effects of the Russian-Ukraine conflict on the surge in petroleum products. So, in your expert opinion, how exactly is this happening?
Basically, Russia is a heavyweight when it comes to oil production. They are the second largest country in the world that produces oil. So the war in Ukraine basically brought some panic reaction from the market. Markets always react to, especially the commodity market, they react to events in the world, the geopolitical context and all of that. Even a careless statement from a powerful leader can trigger some market reaction. So knowing that Russia was going to face a ban, immediately the market was reacting. And since then, everybody thought this war was going to be like a few weeks. Now it's over 3 months now. So the prices continue to go up, but the prices are going up partly because of the fact that Russia is facing a ban. They can access certain markets, and also because of panic. So importers would want to make sure that they are secured. So they are rushing everywhere for alternatives, and that is actually pushing the prices up.
Right, so from what you said earlier, the surge is not only dependent on the Russian-Ukraine conflict, but there were several other factors that also contributed to
That's
the
correct.
surge.
It wasn't solely, the prices were going up even before the war, and it was mainly because the economies of the world were rebounding after COVID. The airline industry, tourism basically collapsed. There were lockdowns, people were not moving, so demand had been suppressed. And the producers also reacted by reducing supply, and they haven't actually ramped up as quickly as the demand is growing. I think we are even fortunate that China is also still under lockdown because they are also a major importer. So yes, the prices were actually going up before the Russian war, but with Russia being such a heavyweight in oil exports, they've actually exacerbated the problem, and that's why it's a weekly thing. The prices keep soaring.
Right, so what about OPEC members? One would say there are about 15 member countries as at 2022. Can they join forces to increase production and salvage the situation, or it's not that simple?
It is. OPEC actually contributes about 30% of global exports every year. And when you add OPEC Plus, which include Russia and smaller producing countries, they've actually promised increasing their production to capture or reflect the shortage that is likely going to come from Russia. But it's one of panic reaction, as not so much shortage, but the prospects that there are going to be shortages is also part of that, because OPEC they've actually promised to increase their daily production by over 600,000 barrels. But if you consider the fact that Russia, they do about 10 million barrels a day, So it's not so much shortage, but how markets are responding to what is going on in Eastern Europe. So they are doing something about it. They knew this was going to be the issue, so they started talking to, US started talking to OPEC to increase production and all of that. They have, but the markets are still very sensitive to, just like when the Gulf War started, the markets are very sensitive to some of these things. So they are doing their bit, but it's a combination of speculation and also demand and supply. So once these commodities are being traded on a daily basis, when they look at the demand, they look at the projections from the supply side, the prices are always determined by the market forces, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. So OPEC is trying to react, but I mean, to lose 10 million barrels a day, it's going to take a hell of effort to be able to catch up. Yeah.
Right, so let's narrow it down to Ghana, our own situation. Now, we've talked about the global scene and the factors that has contributed to this. Ghana is also part of the globe. We are not an island, so definitely it has trickled down to our own economy as well. But in the case of Ghana, can we attribute the increase in petroleum prices solely to the Russian-Ukraine conflict? Or there are several factors that you've identified in the country that has resulted in this?
So, I mean, when you qualify that as solely, I mean, that no one economic phenomenon is responsible for everything that is happening. In Ghana, we know, I know the politicians don't want to talk about that or don't want to accept that, but coming out of COVID and all of that. In our situation, it's not just the Russian-Ukrainian war, but it's mainly because of the fact that as a result of the war and as a result of everything that is happening, the COVID and everything, inflation everywhere, supply chain shortages and everything going on, unfortunately for us, our city is also losing its value. So in our case, it's becoming a double whammy where you have the prices as they buy it on the global market going up. And then when they arrive here, because we pay for the product in cedis, they have to convert that in cedis using the prevailing exchange rate. So in our case, there are two forces moving in the same direction. Assuming that the global prices were going up and our currency were to be stable, the increases wouldn't have been this significant. Or even if the currency was maintaining its value or strengthening against the dollar, we wouldn't have experienced that. So when they go in every 2 weeks, when they order the product, the prices would have changed. And when they come in and they are converting it to, because the cedi has weakened, you also see that. So those are the things that are accounting for the jump in Ghana. So in our case, there are two powerful forces that are not going for us. They are all moving, trending the same direction. And when it happens like that, we're in for trouble.
You don't want to use the word think tank, so as an energy expert, what solutions do you think we can find to this?
Unfortunately, governments everywhere seem to be running out of ideas. I mean, I heard the US president blaming the oil marketing, producing companies as being too selfish and greedy because they are keeping all the profits, and so I think it's getting out of control now, and they don't seem to have any solution. But I think part of the things that this administration is doing, and I think it's helped in a sense, because but for what they did in this window, this pricing window, we probably would have experienced a higher price, in the sense that they sold some forex. The Bank of Ghana sold some forex, $50 million US to the BDCs at, I believe, not at the market rate, but some lower rate. So it's accounting for the reason why we probably wouldn't have experienced a much higher jump. Beyond that, we may have to look at issues like what actually led to the deregulation in the first place. That's, I mean, subsidizing products. And unfortunately, I'm not too sure whether they are in a position to do very much about it, because they have serious fiscal challenges. Several statutory payments are in arrears. They're not doing too well as far as we're not bringing in enough money in terms of our revenues. And unfortunately, I know we've been talking about the taxes and the levies. Most of these taxes and levies are also tied to either some facilities that they've taken. I mean, you've heard about collateralization of some of the levies. The ESLA, for example, has been used to raise some money in bulk, so that is what is servicing the ESLA. A few months ago, they dropped one of the levies. They froze it for 3 months, and the reason why they've had to reinstate that levy again has to do with the fact that that was the levy they were using to subsidize premixed fuel. So government can decide to say that I am holding on to some of the levies, but something has to give. There has to be a trade-off. Some government expenditure will have to be put on hold, because when we stopped the price stabilization levy they stopped it for like 2 months, we were told that it was costing, not costing, but it was like about 90 to 100 million cedis forgone per month. So 2 months would be 200 million cedis. So you ask yourself, what can the 200 million cedis do? I mean, or what was that money being used for? Even if it was going to the consolidated fund, it means that government was worse off by 200 million Ghana cedis. So yes, we are all consumers. We feel that government needs to do something. But the way I see, it's clear that the government probably must have been at its wit's end, because they don't seem to have enough space to do that. But there is also the other side of the equation when we talk about prices going up. It's also the fact that we are also exporting some amount of crude. So it is not a bad news in totality, because, I mean, if we projected that we were going to sell our crude at, let's say, $60 or $70 a barrel, and now we're doing 125, it presupposes that there is some form of, I won't call it windfall, but government is going to get a little bit more money than they had budgeted for. So one area that the government could be looking at is probably to say that, okay, let's also give some of that back and say that we're going to use that to cushion the system. But it is not easy, and I think if it were to be simple like that, I believe they would have responded to that by now. They wouldn't have even removed the levy for only 2 months and said that we're bringing it back. So I think they must be a little bit more frank with us and like do the needful by telling us, look, these are the consequences. And we can't do much because if we do this A, B, C, D are going to suffer. But as a consumer of petroleum product myself, I will be happy if I'm not going to have to worry about every 2 weeks thinking that I'm definitely going to be able to spend more on my fuel. It is not easy, but again, we take consolation in the fact that it's not only Ghana. You see, when it comes to petroleum product, everywhere in the world, you go to UK, you go to the US, they are breaking all kinds of records as far as unit cost of petroleum products are concerned. We had truck drivers in Korea were on strike because of the prices of fuel. In Nigeria recently we heard that domestic airlines said they were going to suspend operation because of the price of fuel. It's biting, and that is fueling the global inflation that is going on out there. And because our economy is also import driven, when the Minister of Finance he says that our inflation is imported, I mean, we say he's doing politics, but that's the fact. You know, we import a lot, for example, from Turkey. Turkey's inflation is around 73%. So if you go buying something from Turkey and bringing them here, I mean, in a way, that's the kind of inflation you are bringing into the country. So I honestly think that we are in a bit of a crisis. And it appears, or it's beginning to look like the government is at its wit's end. I mean, if that's not the case, then maybe let's see what else they will be able to do, because the projections are not looking too positive. It doesn't look like prices are going to stabilize anytime soon, and inflation is trending. It's trending, going up from the 17 or 18%, now it's 27. It is clear that something has to be done, but we leave the managers of the economy to figure out exactly what will be in the best interest of the state and what fiscal space they will be able to have.
You're watching International Trade Figures. On today's episode, we're taking a look at the high cost of petroleum prices and whether there's a way out for an economy like ours. We are discussing this with energy expert Mr. Ishmael Ajekumine, the Executive Director of KITE. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. The surge in petroleum prices occasioned by the Russian-Ukraine conflict is still ongoing. On today's edition of International Trade Figures, we are taking a look at the surge and whether there is a way out for a country like Ghana. We are having this discussion with energy expert Mr. Ishmael Ajekumine, the Executive Director of KITE. Right. My next question is on the pros and cons of price control. But from everything that you said, is it going to get worse before it gets better? And is it even going to get better?
It has to get better. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. There has to be some reprieve going forward. The bashing from all angles, because cost of living is going up, and any increase in transport fares, they translate directly into food prices, into everything that one does. So, quite frankly, I don't think things are going to change within the next 3 months. I mean, we will get a big reprieve if the Ukrainian war ends. I mean, I think that nobody can discount the impact. And when you have Putin making a lot of explosive statements like he did, it doesn't look like he's cooling down anytime soon. So, quite frankly, I don't think in the next 3 months we're going to be able to see petroleum prices trending. You see, the part of our problem here, like I said earlier on, had to do with the fact that, unfortunately for us, our currency is also depreciating. And, you know, the strength of your currency is determined by how much foreign reserves you have. I don't know how sustainable the Bank of Ghana can continue with the auctioning forex, because when you continue to deplete your reserves, it also has a knock-on effect as far as the strength of your currency is concerned. And they also need to give some money to these BDCs to be able to also keep the prices of the petroleum product within reasonable limits. So I don't envy them at all, but I guess they said they will run the economy, so much as we didn't expect. But I'm not being a prophet of doom, but I don't see things changing within the next quarter, like things normalizing and having prices stabilize. It doesn't look like that is going to be the case.
On the lighter side, they said we should all park our cars and buy bicycles.
Well, I mean, it's healthier anyway. If you go to the Netherlands, you see bikes parked everywhere. It's healthier, it's cleaner, but here in Ghana, we will have a lot of accidents because over there they have lanes for bicycles. Okay, if I decide to park my car right now, I can't guarantee that by the time I leave my house and get here, I wouldn't have been killed. But yes, but that place, if you decide to do that, the alternative would have been, for example, if we had an effective public transport system. I mean, you can plan your life to the second. In the UK, in the US, where the public transport systems are reliable. In Japan, I mean, I saw a documentary this week that says that Japan, their trains, they even add seconds as to when the train will be arriving at the station. So you can go park your car and just use the public transport. We don't seem to have options here when it comes to using mass transit systems and all of that. But biking, it wouldn't be such a bad idea if we had the infrastructure to be able to encourage people to do biking.
So let's take a look at price control, the pros and cons of price control. So in the past, now government allows private BDCs to import these petroleum products and sell it at their own cost. It wasn't so some years ago. Do you think this is also contributing to the surge in prices?
Not really, because if you look at the price build-up, you have the X refinery price, which has its own component. Then you have the export price, which also has its breakdown. So yes, even though there's deregulation, it's not as if everybody does whatever they like. It's MPA still exists to be able to, they always supply what they call indicative prices. So the prices as quoted by the BDCs and the OMCs should be within that framework. But we shouldn't even forget why the deregulation. Okay, the system had failed. And as we speak right now, we are still paying what we call the legacy debt. The effect of that failed system saddled the energy sector with so much debt that government will buy crude, give it to TOR, TOR will sell the product at subsidized rate, or they wouldn't allow them to adjust for exchange rate. So even though the exchange rate at the time they are selling the product would have changed, government say, "Oh, keep it." And then the government was saying that we'll pay you the under recovery and all of that, which was never being paid. The banking system were being threatened because they had all given these people letters of credit and all of that. So it wasn't something fanciful that they did. It was responding to. So until this problem with exchange rates and all of that, the problem of bringing the products in country wasn't the government's problem, because if you look at our import bill at the time, it was huge for the year, and you need all of that to be able to bring in. So the private sector is believed to have more money, and once the business is good, they will find their own way of bringing them in. I bet you, if government were still to be involved in this, there will be queues at the pumps, because they wouldn't have had money to bring these products. So obviously, the BDCs are profit motivated, but in the petroleum industry, your margins are predetermined. In fact, the profitability of their business is determined by volumes, not so much like sitting there and say that I want this profit. So your margins are predetermined. And if you look at the price build-up, they only add their margins and they are not allowed to do more than what is reasonable, okay? Except that we are all concerned that sometimes they want to come together and they will play the market and all of that. But much as we giving a bit of power to the private sector, I think it's worked well in the sense that for a very long time we don't see what we used to see, like petrol prices. I mean, the private man, once business is good, they will continue to bring it. They will find a way of bringing it. The only problem is that now when you don't have a stable macroeconomy, then everything begins to look like it was a bad policy. I mean, mind you, we didn't have an option at the time. We needed, and to think of the fact that even some of the debt, as at the time, pre-2005, and even when full deregulation kicked in 2015, part of that debt is still outstanding, still hanging. We call them legacy debt, and we are still paying them back. I think there was a reason why we shifted. I don't think they are making supernormal profit because the MPA is watching over them as well. But the problem is that once you don't have a stable macroeconomy, then we start having this conversation. If the exchange rate wasn't bad, you wouldn't even have come to my office to talk to me because life is really normal. So, unlike other products, I don't think the deregulation is actually part of the problem. In fact, I believe we have reliable supply of these products because the private sector got into the space. TOR obviously is supposed to do 60,000 barrels a day, assuming they have the capacity to do that and all their plants are working. We need about 120,000 barrels a day. We haven't built that refinery. And we probably don't need to build that if we can get finished products coming in. The only advantage is that, well, you can also be creating jobs if you expand your capacity. But that appears to be getting late now, especially with Dangote just completing its $8 billion refinery in Nigeria. Who can compete him? It's one of the biggest refineries in the world. And if he is producing, why, instead of going to Rotterdam, we can just go to Nigeria and get those supplies. But I wouldn't blame this current occurrence. If we have a stable macroeconomy, we wouldn't be worried too much because they are not ripping us off. I don't think they are ripping us off because the regulator is also there to keep an eye on. They are not making, their margins are predetermined. So that's why they fight over pesos, because it's a volumes business.
What about re-equipping or equipping the refineries that we have in here so that we can perhaps refine our own products and use it domestically?
So TOR was built in 1960. It's gone through a lot of refurbishment, and as we speak right now, I'm not too sure that even if we bought the fuel TOR needs on a daily basis, whether the plants are strong enough to give us, to refine, process 45,000, 60,000 barrels a day, I'm not too sure. So, definitely there's a place for local refining. It makes us more energy secured, okay? When you have it under your own control, But the truth of the matter is that we shouldn't be under any illusion that because you are refining the products locally, you're going to buy it cheaper than when they landed here. Because you see, when you have that mindset, that's how come TOR then ultimately gets into debt and all of that. It has to be a profitable business. Otherwise, what's the point? So what the economy gets is, well, maybe you get to keep monies in the economy, but the oil business is a global business. Whichever way you look at it, it's a global business. Even if we were to send all the crude products that we are producing from Jubilee and all our oil fields, even if we send all of them, the peak production is around 120,000 barrels, which is close to our demand if you just take out even our demand for the power and all of that. 120,000 barrels. Okay, the Jubilee partners will not sell the product to you as it is. They will sell it to you, even if they decide to sell it to you. They're selling it to you at how much they would have gotten if they had sent it to Rotterdam, because those products are not yours. Yours is around 20%. So even if you decide to keep all your 20%, and you decide to give all of that to TOR, you cannot sell the product to TOR at a loss. Because now there's a law on how the petroleum revenues are supposed to be managed. The product will have to sell at a competitive price, and then the share that should go to the budget and all of that. So it is not as simple as we are making it look like, oh, if we have the solar, if we have... By all means, if they wanted to do the petroleum hub and they were thinking about huge refineries in the Western corridor, that would have been a fantastic thing. But really, if you look at what Dangote has just done, I'm not too sure whether we still have any edge, because initially we were looking at the West Coast, that we were building this hub so that we take control of the market in the West Coast. But with that one sitting right now in Nigeria, I think we don't really have such a big market to be looking into. But look, anything that affords you a lot more security when it comes to energy is something that you should be looking at. I mean, we can always look at revamping TOR or even building our own refinery, but that refinery should not be almost like a social intervention. It's not supposed to come and make fuel prices cheaper. Strictly speaking, it is supposed to make sure that there's reliable supply and they are recovering costs. Because otherwise, at the end of the day, as at now, if you buy a liter of fuel, you are still paying for some of the debts that were subsidies that you enjoyed some years ago and you thought it was free money. We are still paying for that. So by all means, let's make sure that we are energy secured and we have the infrastructure here, because you never know. I mean, COVID has taught us a lesson that the whole world can shut down. And when you have the supply chain that we experienced during the COVID, you want to make sure that for national security reasons, you have some of these assets in your country. But we shouldn't view those projects as a solution to maybe prices, because you see, when we have that mindset, what it means is that we are encouraging, even if those facilities are here, we are encouraging them to run at losses, because they are supposed to be as profitable as their counterpart where we bring in it. So we create jobs, we expand the economy, and it's not just focusing on having petroleum products for cheap, because if you are being paid well, I mean, assuming there are jobs everywhere, everybody, you think we'll be crying like this? There are too many people who are jobless. There are too many people who rely on government payroll. That is also nothing to take home. So any increase in the system destabilizes their own economy, you know. But yes, people, even in the US where the minimum wage, everybody is complaining. So I think the key is for us to make people gainfully employed, so that they are in a position to afford some of these things. And then when you have a system where when prices are going up, people's salaries are being adjusted accordingly, the economy can run perfectly. Government wouldn't need to do anything. But government is always compelled to act, because government itself knows that it's not paying the people well. He knows that inflation is X, but he can only afford 3% salary adjustment. So government is always compelled to have the human face of that. But the truth of the matter is that people were being paid realistic, or they were being paid living wages, then they can take care of themselves. So I believe if we're looking at even this local intervention, domesticating some of these things, the focus shouldn't be to say that prices are going to suddenly be free. I mean, if when we found oil, people say prices were going to come down. No, we sank close to between $4.5 billion in the Jubilee project. Costs will have to be recovered, and if you keep doing Father Christmas with your crude, you realize that you wouldn't even have finished paying. In any case, those monies were not yours. Okay, you are only having what you have because you are the owner of the resource. but the people who committed the money and they have to pay themselves. So it is not as simple as it is, but we all need to also realize that the system as it is now needs to be fixed. And we need to start from somewhere and say, how do we start turning things around? Otherwise, you and I will sit here the next 10 years, 5 years, we are talking about what we are talking about today, because the structure of our economy wouldn't have changed. And we'll be as vulnerable to the whims and caprices of people like presidents who suddenly decides to misbehave, and everybody, they say when American cough, they cough, the whole world catches cold. You know, we can't live our lives like that because we are helpless.
So my question earlier on was, we wanted to find out if there was a way out for a country like Ghana as far as high cost of petroleum prices are concerned. But based on everything that you said, it will take a while.
It will take a while, but like I said, even if we decide to, let's say, switch to electric vehicles, it is going to take some time. And if we take that decision, we need to stay that course. Otherwise, the moment prices stabilize, we will forget about our woes, you know, typical Ghanaian. The options for me, if you're looking for short-term measures, I think we don't have a lot of options. And again, like I said, people say government can take off the levies and stuff like that. It will give us temporary reprieve, but what it also means is that it's going to be at the expense of something. So there's a saying in P that if you cut your own tongue and chew it, you haven't chewed any meat. Okay, so if by getting some free money, it's going to be at the expense of something, maybe a hospital that wouldn't be completed or some drugs that they can't supply, and you might not realize that you're getting the waivers is as a result of the reason why your auntie in the village died of snake bites because there was no serum there. They are all linked, and government, when they don't have enough resources, are limited. But as a consumer, I will be happy if I'm paying less for everything that I do, because our salaries are also, they don't change as these prices are moving. But if we have a plan, and like we talked about refineries, we talked about e-vehicles, we talked about everything, if we have them in place, we will be able to then have a situation where you are in a position to make choices. Okay, but at the moment where everybody, even the vehicles that we have on our roads, it will take us years before we'll phase them out. And they are inefficient, they are rickety and all of that. We buy second-hand vehicles which are inefficient. So even if we're all using efficient vehicles, we probably don't need the kind of fuel that we are bringing them in. Demand would have come down and all of that. For the current crisis, everybody is suffering. We are not the only people, but it doesn't mean that we don't have our own challenges as a people. We can't pretend that everything is as a result of the global crisis. There are things that we need to do ourselves to make sure that, assuming things are to stabilize everywhere, we wouldn't be, let's face it, we've had challenges with exchange rates and forex. It's been legendary. The problems did not just appear, and it also didn't happen only under this regime. So when we talk as if it's somebody is not doing what they are supposed to do, it's a little bit hypocritical. I think we have a problem as a people, and I think we should accept that and see how we can change things. Because the truth of the matter is that I don't see what else anybody could have done under the circumstance, given all the constraints that everybody has coming out of COVID, and also what is happening to the extent that there were baby food shortage in the U.S. Where was that a dream or something like that? That they had to go to Europe and they had to, no, I mean, we are not in normal times at all. For 40 years, for the first time in the US and the UK, they had to increase their interest rates. For the first time in 40 years. So we are not in normal times, but I think we can also be overly defensive. Let's see what we can do, however small, to let the people know that, look, we can't do much, but we can do this very little for you, and then let's tighten our belt. Of course, then also they should also tighten their belts as well, because you can't be loosening your belt when I'm tightening mine. You know, it brings all kinds of frustration.
Right. So you touched on it briefly earlier. What are some lessons that you say we must learn from the current global economic crisis? Talk of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just when we thought it had gone down and economies had started recovering and all of that, then there was a Russian-Ukraine conflict. So with the recent global occurrences or happenings, what lessons must we learn? Must a developing country like Ghana, for instance, learn from these occurrences?
As much as possible, you learn to be self-sufficient and dependent. Okay. Ultimately, I mean, Ghana is sad that we have everything, but we struggle. I think God probably over-pampered us by giving us everything that we need. So maybe we probably don't think, even in this current situation, food prices are going up, but you don't have too many people struggling to find something to eat. Okay, a lot of people, Ghana, if you want to fill your stomach, it might not be nutritious, but you won't sleep on an empty stomach. Okay, but what we should be learning is the fact that we can't continue to depend on anybody. And we need to do our things properly so that we have enough shock absorbers. If we had enough buffer, Putin can afford to say that ban my oil because they have enough reserves. He can take care of his people for, I'm sure, for as long as he continues to be in this war, if he needs to do that. But you can't do that because you don't have the means to be able to do that. So others have done it, we can also do it. Let's look at what our competitive advantage is. Don't let us pretend to go to the moon when we don't have the competitive advantage. What do we have? Let's master that and see how we can use that to our advantage. Okay, and this is basic economics, everybody knows about it. We know that this system will help us, so we need to do things differently going forward. We don't have to relax now that, for example, when the COVID eased a bit, I believe we all recalled and thought that business as usual, and now it's going up again, and we don't even have the money to be able, we don't even have the hospitals to keep people there. And that's why it gets on my nerves when the people who are more and more vulnerable, you and I, if we catch COVID, I believe we'll know somebody who will be able to put us at the University of Ghana Medical Center. Somebody will call somebody and you get there. But there are some people, even when they have money, they won't get into those facilities where they will be taken care of. They are the same people who complain. You see, so it's unfortunate, but it has to start from somewhere. As a people, let's come to a place where we draw the line and said, look, let everything that has gone under the bridge go. Let's start rebuilding so that our children will have a better Ghana. You know, there are so many lessons that we need to learn. If we don't learn it, then I'm afraid.
Thank you very much for your time. This has been insightful, and honestly, the picture seems gloomy. I mean, there's hope, but taking a look at the current situation, especially on petroleum prices and the astronomical increase that trickles down to other sectors of the economy, and having heard that there's no hope in sight at the moment, it's a bit discouraging, but we hope that everything that has been discussed.
What I meant to say was that there are no quick fixes. There are no quick fixes, and I said within the next 3 months. I am not too sure very much could be done about it, but like you rightly said, I think let's brace ourselves for a little bit more tougher times, and then hope that things are going to get better. We can have a better Christmas.
And that was the Executive Director of KITE, Mr. Ishmael Ajekunhene. We discussed the current surge in petroleum prices and the way forward. There's more after this break. Don't go away. And it's a wrap for today's edition of International Trade Figures. Join us same time next week for some more on international trade-related activities here in Ghana and beyond. International Trade Figures is brought to you by Good Energy, ADB, Truly, Agric and more, Public Elegance and Pediasi Valley Resort. My name is Anna Spio. Bye-bye. Join us same time next week.